This story is completely true. It happened to my sister and I. I was about 12 years old and my sister was about 6. We had moved to California and I didn't like the new house to begin with. I had a weird feeling about it. Anyway, in the beginning were a small chain of events that were unexplainable until the paranormal activity became so apparent that it couldn't be dismissed anymore. The first thing that happened was to my mom, who had been home alone one night. As she was making something in the kitchen, she then heard a big noise from the bathroom. Upon investigation, she found that everything on the counter and in the medicine cabinet and in the bathtub had been thrown into a pile in the middle of the floor. Then maybe a few days later, when my sister and I were ready to go to bed, my sister said she saw 2 red eyes inside the closet. I didn't see them, but from how scared she was, I believed her. We shared a room and we had bunk beds. My mom comforted her until she fell asleep. I slept shortly after. I awoke later that night from a small continuous noise coming from the foot of my bed. I had the top bunk. When I looked at my feet, I could see this dark, black-figured shape jumping up and down at the foot of my bed. Every time that it jumped up, it would leer at me with these little red eyes. These eyes seemed to sink into its face until the red would just disappear. I couldn't see much detail to his facial features, but I did realize that he was wearing a brim hat, like Charlie Chaplin. I started to scream, and within a couple of seconds, my mom came into the room. But before she was able to turn the light on, I saw the little man, about 3 feet tall, hurry and run into the corner of the room and disappear into the darkness, just before my mom turned on the light. This was not the first of many experiences we had. A few days later, I woke up in the middle of the night. I still had that experience fresh on my mind, so I very carefully peeked my head over the railing of my top bunk and looked around the room. When I saw the little man, this time he was just being very still and quiet, and he was just standing at the foot of my sister's bed, watching her. Our bunks were in the shape of an L, so I could see the lower half of my sister's bed. He then noticed me and looked at me. I yelled, and again, just 1 second before my mom got into the room, he would again run into the corner of the room and disappear into the shadow. Every time he would run to the corner, he would stop for half a second facing the wall and disappear. What I always thought was weird was the fact that the corner of the wall seemed to be the only place he could escape from. I told my mom what happened and how he returned. So after a few more nights of seeing this little man, experiences between both me and my sister, my mom started to get really curious. She always told us that there was nothing to worry about, but after we woke up so many different nights from the same figure, she began to grow suspicious that maybe we weren't lying or imagining it. So what she did next, she did not tell us until years later when we were grown up. If she told us at that time, it would have made us even more frightened because we would have known that it was not our imaginations. She told us that she stayed up one night with all the lights off. She was sitting in her chair in her bedroom, looking down the hallway to the entryway to our bedroom. What she saw next startled her. She said that after about an hour and a half after she turned the lights out, she saw a little man who came into the hallway from the bathroom. He started to walk into our room when he must have sensed something. My mom said he stopped and slowly turned around and looked at her with those sunken in little red eyes. She said he then turned back around and went into our room. She hurried up and ran into our room and turned on the light, but he had vanished. We lived in that house for about another year. We continued to have strange things happen. It didn't let up until my mom and dad decided to move. Personally, I believe to this day that the little man had to be some sort of demon, not a human spirit. One thing that I never liked about it was the fact that countless times I would look around in the middle of the night, and every time he would be still, just watching us, either from the foot of my sister's bed, or he would be standing in the corners watching us. I never liked that, because you just never know how long he could have been watching you as you slept. My name is Amber, and I'm almost 22 years old. I have always been a firm believer in ghosts, but was never a believer in evil entities. So the first time I saw a shadow being, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. It was the spring of 2007 when the first encounter occurred. I was working on a short story for my high school science fiction class when I suddenly felt like something in the room had changed. Something wasn't right. I couldn't detect anything, so I just shrugged it off as having an overreactive imagination and went back to writing. Again, the feeling came back and I was overwhelmed with dread. So I turned around, looking all around the room, and that's when I noticed it. Huddling in the corner, it was black, short, no distinct features. I saw it reach its hands out and I screamed at it to go away, and it sank into the other shadows in the room. Shadows that were obviously made by the light shining on objects. That was my first encounter with the shadow beings. The second encounter occurred about 2 years later. It was a bright sunny day in summer. I was in bed with the fan on, trying to beat the heat. I decided to call up my friend Katie because I was bored and wanted someone to talk to. Our conversation didn't last long because she had to get ready for work, so there I was again, with nothing to do. I was about to reach for a book when I noticed something near my window. I thought it might be a kid blocking the window, but this thing, it seemed to have materialized out of nowhere. It was like a giant blob with no form. At the blink of an eye, it was just gone. It had me running out of my room in fear, and I definitely didn't sleep in there for quite a while. My last encounter occurred months before I moved into my own place. I was watching TV in the dark upstairs. A horror movie, of course. I had to pause the movie because it suddenly became chilly in the living room, and I went to grab a pillow and blanket, wanting to keep warm, and also deciding that I would sleep upstairs. It's a small comfort thing that I've had since I was a kid after I watched a horror movie. It makes me feel safe knowing that my parents are in the next room. Well, when I came back upstairs, I noticed that there was something huddled in the corner. I thought it was my sister Santana, because she always made her way upstairs to the living room, because she thought her room was too cold to sleep in. As I approached the corner, I realized it wasn't her, but one of the shadow beings that I had seen before. As quickly as I noticed it wasn't my sister, it had disappeared, as if evaporating. These shadow beings are not just a figment of my imagination. They're not my eyes playing tricks on me because of the way the room is lit. The shadows are pure black and look as if they could be solid. Sometimes they take the shape of a human. Sometimes they are shapeless. Or at least in my experience with them, that's what has happened. I don't know why it targeted me to be the one able to see it, or where it even came from, and if it's still in that house. My whole family moved away, and I'm in my apartment on the opposite side of town, with no shadow being encounters for at least 9 months. I do know that my mind was telling me that that thing was evil, and something bad would happen if I stayed there with my family any longer. So I immediately began searching for an apartment after the last encounter, finally feeling free once moving into my own place. I was, and still am, glad to be free of whatever it was that was haunting me. I have been searching and searching and searching for every reasonable answer as to what is going on in my apartment and with my 4-year-old child, Gigi. When Gigi was about 2 years old, there was an incident where Gigi bolted out of the downstairs bathroom, shaking, tears in her eyes, and her voice was shaky as well. She kept repeating the name Ralph. She honestly scared the crap out of me, and I didn't know what to do besides prove to her that nothing was in the bathroom. About 2 or 3 months later, a strange incident occurred where the Airwick motion sensor freshener was on the wall. You can set the timer for these, and I had it set to 36 minutes. So every 36 minutes, it would let out a small burst of freshener. One morning, around 5 a.m., I heard a huge crash and ran downstairs where I found the air freshener in the middle of my kitchen floor. I brushed it off thinking that maybe it just fell, even though the freshener was in the hallway next to the kitchen. About another 5 months go by, and my daughter has the same reaction to Ralph. But this time, it was in her bedroom. She ran out of the room, and her eyes were swollen and watery. She was shaking and still rambling on about someone named Ralph. By this time, I didn't know what to think because months had passed from the first incident, and between that time, she had never once mentioned Ralph. This is when I began to take candid videos of Gigi talking about Ralph. At first, Gigi would not mention Ralph if you ask her about him directly. As far as Gigi is concerned, he does not exist, but then maybe a week later, she will talk about Ralph to her 5-year-old sister. For a long time, she didn't talk to me about Ralph. Once Gigi started to open up a little more about Ralph, she began giving more information. Mind you, Gigi was 2 when this happened, and she is now 4. I think she is more open to talking about it because she is able to explain more in detail. Well, I've only asked Gigi about Ralph twice. Gigi gave a disturbing story about a man and his entire family being killed. She kept doing this "finish him" movement to the neck with her thumb, like someone's throat is being slit, specifically with a pair of scissors. She's a 4-year-old girl that plays with nail polish and Barbies. Her stories were quite graphic. 3 weeks ago, my mom caught a video of Gigi telling a very graphic story as well. She told me that I should ask the apartment manager if anyone has died in my place before. After a little bit of debating, I went in anyway. I really didn't want to live in an apartment where someone died. I really didn't want to know, but I have to know what's going on with my daughter. I asked just to weed paranormal out of my list of problems for my child. Well, I told the apartment manager what was going on, and lo and behold, a Ralph moved out 20 days before I moved in. Now, this is either a crazy coincidence, or Ralph is a spirit, but her and I both were totally freaked out by it. She informed me that he did not die in the apartment. In fact, no one has ever died in my apartment. We have no one in our family named Ralph. I watch all of her TV shows. No one named Ralph. And as simple as the name Ralph is, it is a very uncommon name, especially for a 2-year-old to come up with. It doesn't end there. Just on Friday night, I was in the shower washing the conditioner out of my hair. Just like most, I have a shower caddy, and on my caddy was my Mach 3 razor. The razor was in the razor holder too, not to mention that there are disposable razor heads. In order to remove the razor from the handle, you have to press the release button. The next thing I hear is a huge crash. The entire razor was no longer in the holder, nor the caddy anymore. The razor was on the second tier of the caddy, and the handle was outside of the shower completely, and laying next to the bathroom door. Something is definitely going on in my home, and I'm scared. I do not want Ralph, or whatever it is in my house anymore. I'm sorry, but I don't find pleasure in ghosts, so any ghostly encounter for me is a terrifying one. Has this happened to anyone else? A few more things. When I asked Gigi about Ralph, she said that he was a tall white man with a grandpa voice. She said that he is dead, and that he lives in the sky, yet he sleeps in our bathroom. This story has never been heard by anyone. I chose not to say anything because I know what happens when you tell someone you have seen a demon. 7 years ago, when I was just 12 years old, something happened to me that I will never forget. My life was altered that cold, windy night. A few friends and I were playing hide and seek, like most little boys do. The neighbors did not care if we played in their yard, and there was a church next to that. We had plenty of room to play a good game of hide and seek, flashlight edition. It just so happened it was my turn to be the seeker. I had given everyone approximately 4 minutes to hide. We counted in the garage with the door securely shut. My 4 minutes were about up, so I began my quest to find my friends. But that was not what I found at all. I started going towards the church and search for them, but then doubled back. I was hoping I would catch them quick. I started walking down the tree line in my friend's backyard. This was approximately 50 yards from the garage where I started. I heard some rustling in the woods, so I knew I found someone. Slowly creeping up on the sound, all I could see was branches and tree trunks. Going deeper and deeper into the woods, I began to feel like someone was watching me, but I knew it was not my friends. I just sensed like it was something else, so I started to get out of there, fast. I finally was out of the woods, and then I started to walk even further down the tree line. I heard that same noise again, so of course, I went back in to see what it was. I probably walked 15 feet into the woods again, and that is when I saw it. My flashlight was aimed at the ground so I could see where I was going. The noise was about 15 feet in front of me. I slowly lifted my light upwards. I began to see strange gray feet, legs, and a back. I dropped my light instantly. With only the moon as my light, I saw this shadow turn around. Standing motionless in front of me was a creature that I had only seen in horror films. It was about 6'6". I can only describe this thing as being a demon. It had wings that were tucked behind itself because I saw them before I dropped my flashlight. His arms were at his side. I could not make out any facial features very well. I hate to sound cliche, but it did have glowing red eyes. It was a very faint glow, but a glow nonetheless. At this point, I was frozen with fear. All I knew was I had to get out of there. I slowly began to step backwards, trying not to make a sound, but I knew my cover was blown. It still remained motionless as I was doing this. I was almost out now, and I could hear sticks breaking, so I knew it was moving. When I heard that, I started running out of there. I was standing in the backyard now, when I heard this loud, swooping noise, like a giant bird taking off. I turned around and saw the most incredible thing I had ever seen in my life. This great creature was flying towards the moon, and I could see its very large wingspan. It disappeared very quickly. I was standing in the middle of the line, speechless, looking at the sky. I forgot we were even playing hide and seek at this point. I just walked back to the house and sat on the steps. Maybe 10 minutes later, my friends came walking up asking me what I was doing. I guess they saw me sitting there from their hiding spot. They thought I had given up or something. I told them I was not feeling very well, not letting on what I had seen. So we all went back inside. The rest of the night, all I could think about was that creature. What was it? What did it want? Where did it come from? These were the things I was thinking of. The next day, I decided to draw as best I could what I saw. A few days ago, I was reading a story that I saw on StumbleUpon. It was about people who have seen some pretty weird things, and this thing sounded like what I saw that night 7 years ago. What really gave me goosebumps, and I'm getting them now for just thinking about it, is there was a drawing that the witness had drawn, and it looked exactly like what I drew. There were a few more stories about this creature, with even more drawings that looked like mine. They all called this thing Mothman. Now I do not know if what I saw was the same thing as all these other people saw, but I do know I saw something that I cannot fully explain. I do not plan on telling my friends or family about this, because they would just laugh at me. I know what I saw. That is all that matters to me. This happened 18 years ago. Behind my mother's house, she had a small trailer, 1 bedroom, very small. Anyways, my brother was with his girlfriend. She was going to spend the night. The night was young, and they were having a good time being alone. 2 a.m. came around, and they were laying down and talking when they felt something land on top of the trailer. They said that the trailer shook hard, and they both got up. They could hear and feel something really heavy on top of it. My brother freaked out and grabbed a rope and tied the doorknob and pulled it and tied it to the closet door, so whatever it was would not come in. As soon as he made the knot, something yanked on the door so hard it shook the trailer, and the trailer was moving side to side. They both said that they could hear as if there was more than one. They heard scratching on the outside, pushing the trailer from side to side, hooting, all kinds of weird noises. My brother grabbed a bat and told his girlfriend to go to the back of the trailer and hide, and whatever comes through that door is gonna get his wig split. His girlfriend did what he said, and again, it tried to open the door. The trailer moved from side to side with constant scratching, and they could hear wings flap, really large wings. They could hear how powerful the wings were by the way the sounds were. The scratching was very loud too. They were so freaked out. Again, it tried to open the door, but never did. After a few minutes later, when everything calmed down, they both decided they would go to the house and sleep in the house instead. When they got inside, everyone was in their beds asleep. I guess he was thinking my older brother was trying to scare them, but that wasn't the case. When I was about the age of 8, my family and I moved to Yorkshire, to a fairly big town, and lived in a large, old-fashioned house. I used to hate going upstairs on my own after school, and I had to ask someone to go with me because I always had this eerie feeling that someone was following me. There were 3 floors. My room was like the size of a cupboard, and I always felt safest there, and in the kitchen. Anyway, one night, after living there for a year and having some strange experiences, like doors opening and closing and unexplainable shadows forming, I felt a presence in the living room. My family's friends had just gone home after a dinner party at around 11 o'clock at night, and I was saying goodnight to my parents. As I sat on the sofa, I felt a heavy weight sit on the other side, and I saw a dip in the cushions. I thought it was just my imagination, so I went upstairs to bed with that awful feeling of someone watching me. I went into my parents' room, and I looked in the reflection of their mirror and saw the wardrobe door open behind me. It scared the life out of me because it made a creaking noise. I'm probably the biggest skeptic there is, and I still don't have a clue what it was that I saw that night. I don't believe in the paranormal, and I'm scared of spiders instead of ghosts. But when I saw that thin, almost skeletal lady in the doorway, dressed in black, I questioned how tired I was. She was a solid figure and looked Victorian age. Make what you want of it, but I think I was just too tired. However, there was always that feeling of being watched and followed that continued for a year until we moved. Before I try to explain what happened, I need to tell you a little background information. The house was located at the head of the holler. In other words, it was the last house in the hollow. Behind and around the house, there were 2 pastures, and behind those were the hills full of trees. We found several large piles of stones scattered around in the back pasture, and thought they were Indian burials. Kids, right? Eventually, curiosity got the best of me, and I started looking into the stone piles. They were large, heavy rocks, and the piles were fairly big. I started finding old marble doorknobs. I thought they were cool and antique, so I began collecting them. This went on for a while, and then one day I found a jet black doorknob. All the other doorknobs were white or varying shades of white. Although I did not realize it at the time, that was where this particular story began. 4 days of weirdness. As far as I know, I've only sleepwalked one time. I didn't find out about it until the next day. My mother told me that I came walking downstairs and went into the kitchen. She thought I was going for a drink or something, but then she heard the back door open. She got up and walked into the kitchen and asked me where I was going. "I have to save Sloan," I yelled. She was confused and asked me what I was talking about. I repeated it and added that Sloan was my horse, and I had to go save him. She told me that she would take care of my horse, and she led me back to bed. She said she realized I was sleepwalking, but my eyes were open, and I was talking and looking right at her. The next night I had a very vivid nightmare. I heard people screaming and yelling, and when I went to the back door to look outside, there was a huge dark silhouette which appeared to be standing behind the hills, with its hands resting upon the hilltops. I could see it from about the waist up. It was wearing a wide-brimmed hat with a pointed top. My family rushed out of the house and down the hill. I woke up terrified. The very next night, I had another nightmare. This time I was being chased. I was in my bedroom, but the bed was in the middle of the room. I couldn't see what was chasing me, except for its eyes. I would look back for a split second, and I would see those horrible eyes. I was running around the bed in circles with that thing behind me. Every now and then, I would make a jump for this window, which was at the top of my door. In reality, there was no door to my bedroom. Eventually, I made it to the window. I strained to pull myself up so I could escape the room and get away from that thing that was after me. In the meantime, my parents downstairs heard a lot of banging noises. My father came upstairs to check on me, and I was not in my room. My window was wide open. He looked out, and there I was. I had jumped out of a window and dropped 3 stories onto a pile of chimney bricks. We had been tearing out an old chimney and tossing the bricks and mortar out that window. Dad ran downstairs, went outside, and picked me up and brought me back into the house. When he came into the house, he literally passed out and dropped me. That was when I awoke, completely unharmed, and with no idea I had been outside. On the 4th night, I was in bed asleep. A chair flew across the room, slammed into my bed, and fell into the floor. This was one of those kid-sized fold-up aluminum lawn chairs. I am absolutely certain that it was sitting in front of my desk when I went to bed. So the sound woke me up, and I raised up and looked around the room. The chair was laying in the floor, folded up by my bed. An instant later, I noticed a figure standing in my doorway. It was the same one from the dream I had a couple nights before, but it was smaller. I could never explain why I became so brave all of a sudden, but I jumped out of bed and started kicking at the thing. My first kick hit the door facing me, but then I kicked the shadowy looking figure, and it slowly dissolved and appeared to vanish into the floor. At that time, my mother came running in and asked me what was wrong. I replied, "It's in the Allen room." She said, "What?" I repeated it. She asked me what was in the Allen room, and after I said it's in the Allen room maybe 5 or 6 times, she grabbed me and shook me and asked again, "What is in the Allen room?" By that time, I replied to her with a simple, "I don't know." The next day I was outside, and for some reason a thought came into my head, as though it were someone or something else telling me, "The black marble doorknob." I cannot explain how I came to think that or hear that thought, but I was convinced that there was something evil associated with that piece of marble. I went to my room and got it. I took it up into the hills and threw it as far as I could. I heard it crashing and tumbling through the dried leaves. The nightmare stopped, and I never walked in my sleep again. All this happened over 30 years ago, but I remember it very clearly. For a long time I asked around, and no one knew what I was talking about. But I did learn that those rock piles used to be houses that had been there several decades before we moved in. We rented and later shifted to a new house in a well-known society in Thane, Mumbai in year 2009. The house was 1,000 square foot, too big for just the 2 of us, me and my husband. I was excited to arrange the house as per my desire. I was not working then, so I had the whole day to myself to put up and arrange things on my own, and I pretty much loved doing it. On the second day since we shifted, as I was busy with arranging one of the bedrooms, I heard a loud noise, as if the pile of books I left in one of the rooms on a table fell to the ground, with a loud thud sound. I was not scared then, but as I reached that room to pick up the fallen books, I found that not even a single book had fallen. Now, I was a bit scared. I tried to recollect what kind of noise had I actually heard, but could not reach to a conclusion. Here I will give a brief description of the neighbors, and the place where the society was. Of the 4 flats on my floor, only 2 were occupied, including mine, and the other occupied flat, I had not met anyone yet there. The society is in a very good location, but on the backside, there is a huge empty land, and there are 8 buildings that are abandoned. Actually, the buildings are complete on the outside, but are incomplete and dilapidated on the inside. And all of this was visible to us from all the windows in all the rooms of the house. Those buildings gave me the creeps. At times I have seen strange lights in the upper floors in one or two of them. Coming back to where I left my story earlier, now, each day, I started hearing similar noises in the house. It all happened when I used to be alone. Sometimes, I would even hear that peculiar sound made by a plastic toy. Anyways, I had ignored them all, since I did not think such things could ever happen to me. Gradually, my husband noticed changes in my behavior. I became very violent, often had terrible fights with him, always depressed, never smiling, and very short-tempered. Things began to come in control when I got a job after about 8 to 9 months. The new job was very close to where I lived, so I used to be home by 6 in the evening. Now, I do not know the reason why, but then one fine day, I heard a male voice whisper in my ear when I had dozed off on the couch watching the television. I was scared as hell. The voice was so real, and I knew I had not dreamed it. After this, I decided to share this with my husband. I knew he would not believe me, but I did not want to wait till something really bad happened to me. In the evening, when I told him about what had happened, he said he had a similar experience a few days back. He was alone that night, since I had stayed back at a friend's place. He thought he heard strange noises, and also felt that someone was watching him continuously. He was unable to sleep that night. That was the only night he was alone and had this experience. I told him that I have had such experiences almost every day. The situation only got worse. One night as we were winding up to go to sleep, I closed the bedroom door and got into bed. Just then, at that moment, there was a loud bang on the bedroom door, and then another one, and one more. It sounded like something was trying to get in to me, and my husband was too scared to yell or cry or say anything. We held hands and waited for the door to open. The door did open, but slightly. We were not able to sleep that night. Still, we did nothing. The next night again, there were 4 distinct bangs on the door, and this time it was even stronger, and the door opened with a swing, but there was nothing. That night, my husband decided to spend the night in a nearby lodge or someplace. I don't know what got into me, and declared that I would not leave my house just because I am scared of something I cannot see, and we stayed back and awake the whole night. After that night, I started hearing a man-like voice whisper in my ear, and animals angry growling, someone screaming and running around the house, and all of this was when I was wide awake and during the daytime. We called a psychic for help. He decided to visit the house, and when he was there, he was finding it hard to breathe. He then blessed the house and told us that there is an evil spirit who was attached to me because I spent maximum time at home, alone. And now the finale. I was home one day since it had rained heavily and transport was a problem. It was 4 in the evening. I was surfing the internet when there was a power cut. I lazily lied down on the couch and was talking to my husband on the phone, when suddenly, something grabbed my left ankle and lifted my leg, and then tried to throw me off the couch. I froze and sat up straight, and then there it was. I saw a shadow of a human-like figure on one of the walls. It was moving back and forth in a weird manner. I told my husband what I was seeing and crying at the same time. I hung up and took my purse and the house keys and moved out of there. I went straight to a mall just because I wanted to be in a crowded place. After that day, we stayed at my mom's place till we could find a new rented house. Within 15 days, we were back in that house, only to pack our things and move out. Today we are in a totally different place within Mumbai, and I know that thing has moved in with us here as well. I am seeking help of a psychic now, and somehow that thing seems to be getting weaker day by day. Though sometimes, it makes me known of its presence. I am learning to face it, and yes, the psychic has helped me since that thing has not been able to touch me after that day. It's only some days that I feel it is around me, and I also feel it getting powerless day by day. And now I am not violent anymore, and I manage to keep my temper under control. Also, me and my husband have not quarreled once since we moved to this new place. I know this won't be a very interesting story for everyone, but I know how it feels to face such things in real life. It is the most scariest thing one can ever experience. but I have survived. My younger cousin usually spent the majority of her time at my house. I was 13, she was 2 years younger. On this particular day, we hung out with my eldest brother. Michelle, my cousin, had brought her Ouija board. The three of us, too scared to play with it at night, began using it mid-afternoon. We actually played jokes on one another by pushing the planchette, making it say curses, and things we normally wouldn't be caught saying. We had no idea what would happen by doing this. I can honestly say what transpired over the following nights, I know was directly related to how we behaved when using the board. We all fell asleep in the family room of my house. For whatever reason, I woke up. I could tell it was late. The house was silent. I decided to go up to my room instead of trying to go back to sleep on the hard floor. I remember turning my light on, grabbing my Newport, sitting on the edge of my bed, and having a smoke. My door to my room I left open when I came in. Suddenly I saw my mom in her white robe and our white German Shepherd Heidi walk past my room and go down the hall. I called to my mom. No one answered me. I went out into the hall and followed them both as they went down the stairs, rounding the corner into our dining room and into the kitchen. When I got into the kitchen, expecting them to be there, no one was there, but the fridge door was wide open. Scared, I hurried up and slammed the door shut and bolted back to my room. Sitting on my bed, too afraid to move, I chewed on what had just happened. Then the footsteps started. They were not subtle, they were loud, heavy footsteps. It was like whatever it was, it wanted me to hear it take every step. We had 2 sets of staircases. Once it hit the landing, the stopping continued up the second flight of stairs, down the hall, past my room into my little brother's room next to mine. Then the banging on the wall that separated our rooms began. It was hard, shaking the house. I couldn't believe that no one else could hear it. This went on for the rest of the night, up and down the stairs, and into the room. I didn't tell anyone, but the second night, my eldest brother came knocking on my door. He was now hearing and experiencing what I was. Again, the stomping and banging carried on throughout the night. On the third night, my mother finally heard it. It did carry on for the duration of that night, but it didn't happen again after that. What scared me the most was that this thing took the form of people in my family. Not just my mom, but my dog. All my life I have spent trying to figure these things out. How what happened is even possible.